Welcome back, everybody. It's another model review by Hans, and today we're going to talk about Academy from Korea. And you get to hear me spend the next 20 minutes or so saying that both this is one of my favorite companies and then tear them apart and tell you all the things that are terrible about them. It'll all make sense at the end, don't worry, and it's not all bad. Anyway, let me roll back here into the history so it all makes a little more sense why that all comes together. So Academy's been around since 1970 or so as a manufacturer. Really got going in the 80s and 90s. And in the early 2000s is when I really got into them, and they were quite prolific at the time. And as an Allied modeler in particular, now don't get me wrong, they did a lot of good German stuff as well, but I am primarily an Allied modeler, and I was in my glory with the lineup these guys were releasing. They had a whole big lineup of American tanks from World War II, your M3 lights, M3 mediums, your Shermans, full line of tank destroyers, your M10, your M36, your M18, did them all. And even artillery pieces, like you have the M7 Priest here, which I have not built yet, but also an M12 gun motor carriage, which I love this kit. No one else has done an M12 in 135th. I think there's a Matchbox or something in 172nd, but 135th, this is it. And these are kits that, when you take them out of the box and you build them, they build well. They are well engineered, and they go together nicely. They have a lot of features in them. Great so far, right? Problem comes down to the details. I'll give you a case in point. I unfortunately sold it many years ago. They have a really feature-packed line of M3 light tanks, and all of them have interiors, which is awesome. But they have the same interior for the entire series, which is completely wrong for half of them. There's some dimensional issues with the hull as well, and the M10 here, now, there's no other way to put the hatches on if you have them in an open position other than completely wrong. The hatches they flop open sideways. They're not supposed to do that. They kind of like come up kind of like bunny ears. It's a weird looking thing, but anyway, you can't put the hatches on right unless you really do a modification here. When I built the M12, this is one of my, at the time, I went all out on this kit, and this was a kit that got a lot of traction on the internet, all sorts of stuff, but man, the accuracy issues on this kit were all over the place. It was a lot of work. They are known for the fact that you cannot actually put on aftermarket tracks on an Academy kit without modifying the drive sprockets because the tracks are the wrong width, like by a couple of millimeters, which in 135th, I mean, it's a noticeable difference. And that's the issue that I've always had with Academy, is that the fact that they're good kits. They're fun kits to build. They look great. But they've got and this isn't rivet counter type stuff. This is like dramatically wrong types of things going on with them from time to time. And so when it comes to someone like me, who at the time I was building for competition purposes and super builds and super detailed builds, it drove me bonkers because nobody else at the time had these things. But man, you had to put work in them to get them right. It drove me crazy. Another example here on the M10 was the fact that it comes with an engine in the engine compartment, which is cool. It's like 70% the proper size. Like, it's noticeably way too small. So you're just stuck with these things at times. But anyway, let me crack open one of these kits, and I'll give you a good overview of them, because like I said, there's a lot of good things in them too. So I don't want to spend like this whole time telling you they're bad things. I am going to look at the M7 Priest here because the M10, it's just the box. This is the box I use for my spares when I'm done with the kit. So I'll show you a couple sprues out of here, but let me get this next section going for you. So as always, we'll start with the box. Now this is kind of a representative of what a lot of the early 2000s packaging would look like. It was very consistent in the artwork style, how they did them. Really decent artwork. I mean, it kind of looks a little wonky. I mean, this guy should probably be about that tall in there, maybe. So scale was optional. Their style has changed more recently. They got a new style to their artwork on their boxes and stuff like that. And they actually have been pretty slow on releases lately, but I've heard very good things about their more recent kits, so I might have to come back and do a re-review later on. Typically, you do have pictures of a fully built kit, lightly weathered, definitely an attainable standard for anyone that wants to build these kits. Side, you're of course going to have same pictures here, a little bit of detail. And I believe they are still all being imported by MRC, but I'm not sure. I'd have to verify that again with a follow-up review. Just generic information there. nothing on the bottom. Lift top box. And I'll open these all up off camera so that you're gonna have to hear me crinkling. But anyway, one moment here. Look at the instructions first. I'll come back to the sprues. Instructions are typically black and white. Some information, really standard stuff here. A little weird on this one where they have a separate color markings with advertisement for other kits. Usually they don't do this, but they a little different on this kit. We'll come back to that. Kit breakdown as shown. That's all going to be like a unfolding type of thing. Works in your typical manner, suspension first. Now this particular kit, like a lot of their Allied stuff at the time, does have a lot of interior elements. Not a complete interior, but a lot of parts to it. You do have numerous options, especially with the Allied vehicles. God, these kits came with road wheels upon road wheels at times. A lot of the main armament on the M7, some of the upper hull. Really, like I said, nothing overly dramatic. One thing that kind of does drive me nuts is a lot of these things, they kind of show, they show where a part is, they show an arrow pointing to where it's going to go, but they don't really show you how the part goes on, so you do get some confusion at times. I do find it a little weird on some of their kits, like the boxes on the stowage boxes are kind of just multiple pieces. And on their M3 medium tank in particular, stowage boxes were like dramatically wrong sized. I accidentally upset a couple of historians on the internet at the time because I thought it was right and I worded my stuff badly. And for those of you that I offended at the time, I'm sorry about that. But pretty much standard stuff here. On the back, you do get a parts diagram showing all the parts that are in there. The nice thing that they do include, they actually have a listing of the parts that don't get used. They don't gray them out on the sprues, but they do at least list them. So if you have a part left over, you know you're not supposed to be using it. And you do get color callouts. Not really too much as far as manufacturers for that. I believe these are Gunze numbers for paint choices for manufacturer. You, like I said, you only get kind of one listing there, but unfortunately, if you're not doing Allied stuff, you might have to do some research. It's an American tank, so it's OD, who cares? We get into the color marking scheme again. So the one thing I like about this particular kit, it's a little less common, but they typically try to give you vehicles used by multiple nations for American manufactured stuff. They give a pair of US tanks, one British, and one Free French. They tend to actually give you a lot of options for the different kits for Free French vehicles, which is cool because they don't really get the recognition they deserve. And I do actually like the fact that they have an El Alamein multicolor in there. Don't necessarily trust their color markings though. They tend to be close, but not quite. And again, like I said, they're some advertisement for other kits. Now, I don't believe any of these are actually in production any further. The M3 medium was pretty nice because it had a full interior, but like I said, a lot of dimensional and weirdness in it. So it's a decent lineup, but not awesome. But anyway, let me get these things out of the bags so I can show you the sprues properly. All right, through the magic of film editing, now you don't have to listen to cellophane. Anyway, let's get into this kit here. So, as with all their Sherman-based stuff, it's an Italeri styled hull. Now this particular hull is, I believe, carried over from the M3 medium, but pretty much all their armor stuff is going to have a tub style hull. I don't know what the deal is with this oval. They do that a lot. They have a plug for it, but it just seems silly to me. Anyway, suspension wise, as I mentioned, you get a lot of suspension parts. Get all this stuff out of the way so you can see. Now they have a standard suspension sprue that they use for a lot of the American vehicles. So here you have all your swing arms, your bogie housings, a couple different versions of the return guides, a couple different versions of road wheels. Like in this one here, you have the open or the pressed sprocket style, a couple different kinds of return wheels, drive sprockets, idler wheels, not return wheels. And you'll usually get a couple of like extras for stowage purposes. Now, because two sides, you get two sprues. Now, this sprue is typically included with any of their early war American subjects. They have a similar but slightly different sprue for their late war stuff. Like, for instance, this is your straight arm bogey unit with the pillow block in it. They also offer some models with the late raised arm. And this particular kit, of course, like I said, you get a lot of suspension stuff. This one should actually use the centered return roller, so you get another set of bogey wheel housings, and another set of swing arms. I mean, you almost get a whole nother suspension, but oddly enough, you get the, oh no, never mind, it makes sense. The early centered return wheels with the fancy drive sprockets, multi-piece drive housing. Like I said, you get a lot of extra parts in your Academy kits because they kind of try to economize. Of course, here this is a unique kit, a unique sprue to the M7. Now, a little weird here that they have some separate track blocks, some stowage, nothing too dramatic here. This, of course, here is the upper hull assembly. Academy, all their American stuff tends to come in this dark green plastic. I forget what color their German stuff comes in. I believe it's like a tan that it comes in. So, and then you have the last sprue here, and the kit is more of the M7 specific stuff. Now we start getting into like some things that drive me crazy. Like, for instance, I like the fact they include all the ammo stowage, but it's just very basic, just cylinders. And I get that they come in cardboard tubes in reality, and that's not far from reality, but I mean, it's just some of the stuff's a little bit on the simplistic side. They give you a lot, but it's just, I don't know, the last step just doesn't seem to hit. And Academy is a rubber band track company for the most part. Their M3 light tanks came with both rubber bands and individual links, which was cool, but that's pretty much the only one they've ever seen. And you also have in there a couple of their accessory sprues. So the sprue Y here is their 50 cal. Now at the time, their 50 cal was considered to be one of the better ones out there. You get a pair of them on the sprue there. I believe they sold this as a separate piece as well. And you have another accessory sprue with 30 cal. Now, it's not included in this kit, but I'm also going to show you one of the other accessory sprues that was very common for their US stuff. This is the stuff that I keep saying that Academy occasionally does really cool stuff. They just don't follow through on everything. So this is another of their accessory sprues, Sprue H. Sort of a generic thing. You got some fuel cans, you got some ammo cans, stuff like that. But, you know, the cool stuff is in this area right here. So this is a nod towards the super detailed builders. And I'm going to see if I can get a good view of this here. What you have is a whole set of lettering and rivet heads and tie-down loops and casting markings for, and also you have some like, what are they called, wing nuts here. So this is like super detailed people type of stuff, like a whole set of lettering here. The idea here is you would actually shave these off of the sprue and you would apply them down with glue, of course, to start putting, like, you know, casting numbers and stuff like you would often see on the primary drive housing and stuff like that. So stuff like this is just, they did some really cool stuff. I just wish they would have, I don't know, measured. Like I said, for instance, you have this weird oval thing. I don't know what the deal is with this. I've never seen any purpose for it, but it's on a lot of their Sherman hulled type stuff. Alternatively, like you have here, your idler wheel, your tensioner mechanism, that's all like locked, it's all glued on, it's part of the hull, you can't change it, so it's sort of a little weird in that regard. But also I have a couple other things to show you real quick here. And like I mentioned, their drive sprockets, and the drive sprockets, you get all the drive sprockets you want. The problem is that in order to use these with any other brand of track, you need to put a spacer in there because they're too narrow. So if you're ever going to build an Academy kit, make sure to test your drive sprockets before you put your tracks together, because the last one I did, I forgot, and oops, had to source some drive sprockets. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit of the kit details here to show you what I'm talking about. Now, on the M10, like I mentioned, the hatches here, and I'll probably throw a picture on here to show how the hatches should look. This is how the kit would have you install the hatches in the open position. This is completely wrong. The hatches should be in a completely different orientation. I'll show you a picture here in a moment. But at the same time, too, you get a very presentable interior here. You have, it's got a really sharp look to it. Sorry, I don't usually glue my antennas on because I don't want to stab people. This antenna here is actually by Formations Models. Highly recommend it. I'll cover them in a future video. But you get a lot of nice interior detail here. I mean, you get a lot of really, you know, it's a decent looking vehicle. Now, your pioneering tools is a bit on the basic side. And actually, whoops, you know what, this one didn't have that stupid oval in it. I spoke too soon. But like I said, it's one of those where, I mean, and these are not the original tracks, so it's one of those where you get a decent looking vehicle, but when you start measuring things out, there's just issues with it. Now, I'll grab my M12 here to give you another example of that. Now, this got to be a little careful with this one because this one is starting to age quite poorly and having stuff fall off on it. For instance, you have here, this is a sponson support, right? The original kit, it just had this piece hanging off in space. I had to scratch build this entire plate system here that actually tied it into the bogie unit, because this bar is actually there to hold up the sponson to keep it from sagging because of the design of the vehicle. But this whole section here was just missing. It was not part of the kit whatsoever. And you know, the barrel, this is an aluminum aftermarket barrel. The barrel on this was actually terrible. It had a huge seam line on it. So it's one of those where, I mean, I had to add a lot of detail. Like there's an entire seam line in here. Which side? Yep, this side. And I can't quite see it. I must have painted over it. There's a weld seam here that I had to add because there's just detail that's missing. And as I recall, this is actually a little bit, like the width was a bit off on it because I did put in an aftermarket housing up here. It didn't quite fit. So, I mean, like I said, there's just dimensional issues all over the place. You get a really cool kit, but some of the issues are going to drive you nuts. And then, of course, the engine I added later that was Berlin. Oop, hit my microphone. But I mean, it's the kits come out really nice, but they take a lot of work to get them up to a high standard. Which is why you're going to see for Academy, there is a lot of aftermarket stuff out there. Like an engine deck here to correct, you know, a lot of correction stuff. Stowage bins because the originals are the wrong size. Things. I think this is also Tiger models, but you're going to see there's a lot of aftermarket out there for Academy to do corrections. So just because of all the dimensional issues that they have. Yep. One element I realized I forgot to discuss when I went through the boxes. I actually forgot to talk about their decals. Don't. Honestly, I can't stand their decals. Their decals tend to fall apart quite easily, even if the kit is like only just hitting the market and the decals are obviously fairly recently made. Decals fall apart pretty easy. They're a little bit on the thick side and they tend to be very simple. So, I mean, realistically, I tend to not use their decals whatsoever. But I mean, this is a tough one though, because like I said, I've just spent a lot of time telling you about how these guys have a lot of dimensional accuracy issues. At the same time too, they build well. They really build well. And they make a lot of subjects, and I don't know what this part is. It's gonna drive me crazy. Anyway, I'll keep it for later. They make a lot of subjects that at least they used to make a lot of subjects that people really didn't have. And I bought a lot of their kits. I built a lot of their kits. The plastic is of really high quality. The mold quality is exceptional. I've very, very rarely had any issues with ejector pin marks or flash or anything with their molding. So their manufacturing is quite good. Their plastic glues well, it paints well, it builds well. I mean, if you're going to get into the nitty gritty, I don't particularly care for their tracks either, but that's not unusual for most kit manufacturers out there. But man, some of the dimensional issues or the accuracy issues are just bonkers that they get away with them. So I don't know. It's sort of it's up to you where you want to go with that. For instance, now, and this is going to go back to my typical rating system. If you're a beginner modeler, if you're a casual modeler, if you're not going to worry about the hatches on the M10 being a bit goofy and how they're mounting, if you don't worry so much that the interior on your M3 light tank is the wrong one, these kits are really good builder's kits. They build well. They come out. I mean, they're 90% of the way there for accuracy. They look really good, and you'll enjoy them. The only issue I would have in that case is the fact that they've slowed down quite considerably on their release schedule, and a lot of their stuff is no longer available. So they're just not as available as they used to be. So I'm going to give these guys an A for a beginner modeler, for a casual modeler. Build these, buy them. They're going to build well. You're going to have fun with them. If that's what you're looking to do, go for it. But if you're going to take one of these things to a competition, no. You're going to get torn apart. There's just typically too many accuracy issues with their kits to make them viable for that. So for a competition modeler, if you're a rivet counter, if you're super serious about this stuff, C, D rating maybe. Like I said, some of their stuff is particularly egregious, like that interior on the M3 light tank. The interior is only correct for the horseshoe turret style tank, which is the least produced one, but most of the ones that they sold were a completely different version. So there's a reason there's so much aftermarket stuff for these guys. You're going to spend a lot of time, you're going to spend a lot of money, spend a lot of effort to get them to look good. I mean, this thing, the M12 that I built, this was a long-term build, and then I probably put $100 or more of aftermarket stuff into it just to get it to be somewhat accurate. So yeah, casual modelers, Academy is a great company. If you're not super serious about this, if you want something that looks good on the shelf, builds up easy, go for it. I highly recommend them, but not for competition, guys. If you take this to like an IPMS show or an AMPS show in an area where you're very busy with a lot of competition, you're going to get torn apart. It's not worth the effort. Look to more modern kits. So that's where I'm going to end with this one. And like I said, I am going to come back at some point to re-review Academy because, like I said, they're not really releasing very many kits anymore. A lot of their lineup now is from the early 2000s when they were having these accuracy issues. But I do have a lot of information coming to me that they're newer kits. They've done something different and they have improved on them. So I want to see what that is and see how it is, because I don't want to bash these guys and miss out on something good. So I will come back to review Academy again to see their newer kits. And their aircraft, it's a whole different world. Like I said, wait for my aircraft review because I built a lot of their kits in aircraft stuff as well. I just don't have an unbuilt kit to do a review yet, so that will be coming. Anyway, that is Model Reviews by Hans. I'm hoping you guys are enjoying this stuff. Like and subscribe if you do, because it'd be nice to know somebody's watching. And if you guys want to start seeing other stuff to review, I'm going to start in the near future. I'm going to start doing some aftermarket stuff. I'm going to branch out from the model building. I got some cool radio controlled stuff I want to do. And so you're going to start seeing some other different topics here coming up real soon. But anyway, that's all for the next review. And until then, I will catch you guys later.